Hello, everybody. I just thought I'd let you know this is the first video in a series of videos where we'll be helping you to learn how to provide food for yourselves without breaking the bank that is actually nutritious. So, if I were to start if I were to start from scratch, I've got a lot of fancier kitchen items, but if I were to start from scratch, bare minimum items, this is what I would personally want. First off, you need a cutting board. I would say you need a chef knife. You need a paring knife. Your paring knife can also double as a steak knife if you're having something along those lines. A chef knife, what makes the difference is that you have this height right here, so when you hold it against the cutting board, you can chop down without wrapping your knuckles against the cutting board. There are also Santoku chef knives, which are an Asian style. You'll see that in a Santoku, it doesn't have this bevel in the blade. With a Santoku knife, the method of chopping is more of a push, because you're pushing a flat edge against it, whereas with a European style chef knife like this, it's a rocking motion as you go through. It's still a push, but it's a rocking. The brand of these is Old Hickory. They are a carbon steel blade, so they have a tiny bit more maintenance than a normal blade does, but like a stainless steel blade. But the advantage to carbon steel, it will dull more quickly, but it's much easier to sharpen, whereas stainless steel blades can be much more difficult to sharpen. This is probably the place where if you're going to treat yourself, this is the place to do it, because a knife is one of the most used items in your kitchen. And having a good knife versus a bad knife can make the difference between certain jobs, like chopping harder items, like let's say winter squash or sweet potatoes. It goes from being really, really difficult, almost to the point of not being able to do it, to really not being that difficult at all. If you're going to have a knife, you also need a cutting board. Me personally, I hate glass cutting boards. A glass cutting board is one of the worst things in terms of dulling your knife. Ceramic or glass will dull your knife incredibly quickly. I do use them on some occasions. Some people are weirded out by the idea of using wood. They think that, you can't get it properly clean, but glass you can get cleaner. And to a certain degree, that is true. However, from a disease, bacteria, that kind of perspective, that's not a concern. They will I believe this is still the case, but I know that in Europe, it was actually required that professional butchers use a wood cutting board for cutting up the meat. And that's actually because wood contains antibacterial properties. Plastic does not. And that is the biggest reason why I do not recommend plastic cutting boards at all. Bamboo, it's really hard on the knives, but I don't believe it has the same antibacterial properties, and a cheap wood cutting board is about the same price as a bamboo cutting board most of the time. If you want a nicer cutting board, you can look at getting an end grain. This is a side grain cutting board. End grain cutting boards, when you look at it, you'll see like the circles of the grain of the wood, and that's the easiest on your knives. Additionally, colander. This is very useful for some specific things, like I use this a lot for straining beans when I'm cooking beans from dry beans. I also use this a lot when I am doing bone broth, because I need to separate the bones and some of the spices from the resulting broth. A thermometer is really required if you're going to be cooking meat. you're either going to be taking a risk or you're going to be cooking your meat to the point where it really doesn't taste good. I know that your grandmother has the whole poke the chicken and see if the juices come out white or red. That's really not enough, especially because if you're in a situation where maybe the piece of meat that you are cooking went from the freezer to the oven. You can do that safely, but you really need the thermometer to make sure that you're safe. I personally also would really recommend getting a thermometer that comes with a cord like this. This is an oven safe cord. The reason being, I can take something, I can put it in either the crock pot, put it in like a Dutch oven in the oven, and I can monitor the temperature of the meat while it's cooking. This one specifically has an alarm that will go off when it's reached a certain temperature, so it makes it very easy. Thermopro, it's kind of old reliable. It's not fancy, but it doesn't need to be, and it will do everything you need. And these are really fairly cost effective. Crockpot. I have Crockpot brand Crockpot. They basically all will be the same, where you have a metal exterior, a ceramic insert, and a glass lid. I do recommend getting one that has the dial as opposed to the digital readout, because the digital ones will usually have an 8 or 12 hour maximum runtime that you can set them for. And when I'm making bone broth, that doesn't jive for me because I'm going to be simmering that broth for 1 to 2 days. This one is something that's not going to be as familiar to a lot of households. This is a stovetop pressure cooker. Now, it is not necessary. However, this opens up a lot of options for us. I like these 4 and 6 quart stovetop pressure cookers because they're really quite cost effective. They're usually somewhere in the ballpark of $15 to $25. And the reality is you get all of the functions of a regular pot. You know, you can cook noodles in it, you could heat up some soup, whatever. You get all of those functions, but you also get pressure cooking. And pressure cooking opens up some avenues to us that will really improve our cook times, how much time we have to actually spend cooking, and also provide a higher quality product for some recipes. Finally, you really need a skillet. You need some kind of skillet. I really prefer to have a cast iron skillet because a cast iron skillet means I can take something from the stovetop and then put it into the oven. And the one last thing that I did not grab here is it's really important to have a couple of mixing bowls. These are glass mixing bowls. You can get nesting metal mixing bowls. Any of those things, those are really good. If I had to hazard a guess, all of this you should be able to get all of this for less than $100. Basic Lodge cast iron skillet, usually $10 to $12. The Old Hickory chef knife, this is a $10 knife. This one is its paring knife. I think it's sold individually for somewhere around $5, but I got this as a set with a few other knives, and it was, if I remember correctly, the knife set was about $20, but it came with a slicing knife, a skirt knife, and a second paring knife. But again, you can get these individually at somewhere like a Walmart, work great for you. Metal colanders, I mean, yeah, they're not expensive. $5 maybe. Cutting board, $10 to $15 in most cases. I believe this was either $15 or $20. It's a little bit more expensive than just a standard pen thermometer. You can get a regular pen thermometer, and you can do everything with a pen thermometer, but it requires you to be going back and forth, checking what's in the oven, pulling it out, taking the lid off, sticking the thermometer in. Oh, it's not ready yet. Put the lid back on, put it back in the oven. That's just more, your time is worth more than that. Depending on the mixing bowls, I mean, really, this can be as cheap or as expensive as you want to make it. There are metal ones, there are glass ones, there are plastic ones. It's not a big deal. Crock pot, this one is an 8 quart model, which is a little bit bigger. That serves me very well for when I'm making bone broth because it gives me more room. But these are usually somewhere in the $15 to $20 range. Like I mentioned, pressure cooker, $10 to $15. Some of these, I have a large family, so some of these are larger versions than you might need if you're, say, a college student, or maybe just a couple who's living in an apartment. But with all of these things, plus, I will say, a stove and an oven, you can do 99% of anything you'd ever want to do in a kitchen. And overall, I believe you could get all of this for less than $100. And with the exception of electronics, and so like the crock pot and the thermometer, you can get any of these items at a thrift store, and they will work just as well for you as anywhere else. And I've gotten a number of things over the years from thrift stores, and take them home, give them a good scrub, and they're good to go. All right, so this wraps up our first little bit here. And if I had to build an absolute minimalist kitchen, this is how I would do it. I hope you all have a good day, and I hope this blesses you. Cheers.